Hello, good evening, and welcome to Prog Chattery 777. Well, we've been chatting about Jethro Tull and Ian Anderson, and we've made it to the most current release. This is 2014's Homo Erraticus. It is the follow-up to Thick as a Brick 2. It is another concept album. It is another conscious prog album. Obviously, Tab 2, Anderson was consciously going for, I'm going to make a progressive concept album. And he follows it up with another one. Like I said before, I think Tab 2 is kind of Anderson's comeback. That was released in 2012, and the last release of original material that we got, full of, complete release of original material, was in 2003 with Rupie's Dance. So even though Anderson was active with Tull and they were still touring and whatnot, there was a lot of little projects that he was involved in. I think Tab 2 is being his comeback album. He's back to writing original material again. And obviously Tab 2, it's Thick as a Brick 2, so there's references to the past and whatnot, which I think is good. It makes that a good comeback album. And I think it also stands alone well on its own 2 feet. But I think I like this one a little bit more because, the concept to it is totally fresh. It's a new idea. There's no... although I think there is a little reference to Gerald Bostock again on here, and he's kind of got that multi-layered concept thing going on. I know the album is credited to Anderson and Bostock, so I think it's just a little joke, I guess. But the concept itself on this album is definitely stands on its own, and it's something unique not only for Anderson, but it's for the whole of prog rock. The concept behind it is the entire history of human migration, centered around England, or the UK, I should say. And yeah, it's well, not the entire history, but a good chunk of the whole history of human migration, which I think is unique in the world of progressive rock and progressive concept albums and whatnot. Because obviously the stereotype with prog albums is that they're not dealing with reality. They're usually in a flight of fancy, or they're talking about Dungeons and Dragons or blah 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 blah. And this is a history book. It's not a book. It's a concept album dealing with real history. And I think that's fantastic. I think that's a brilliant idea for a concept album. So right away I knew I liked the concept. But musically, I think I like it a little bit more than Tab 2 as well. And don't get me wrong, I love a lot of the bits on Tab 2. There's some great stuff. And to be fair, there's a few parts on here that sound like parts on Tab 2, but whatever. And again, like Tab 2, the instrumentation on this is very much referencing the classic 70s, proggy period. But I don't know, I get memories of kind of Minstrel in the Gallery, to be totally honest. I think I like Minstrel a little bit more, but I mean, I re-listened to this, and it really is a fantastic album. But yeah, I mean, if Tab 2, if that's referencing Thick as a Brick 1, musically, I think this is kind of like Minstrel in the Gallery. I can't talk. Sorry about that. Obviously, lyrically, Minstrel is a lot different. Lyrically, Minstrel's very personal songs and kind of love songs and stuff like that. Miserable love songs, but they're still great. And you couldn't get farther away from love songs on here. It's a history. Like I said, it's a history concept. And yeah, we get the same band, we get the same lineup as we heard on the previous album. Let me just make sure I get all the names right here. I'm going to open up my booklet. These are great releases that have come out. We get so much material. We got all the lyrics, and Ian Anderson gives us some liner notes. He gives a little explanation as to why he's not releasing albums as Jethro Tull. Because again, like Tab 2, this to me is, it's as much a Jethro Tull album as Minstrel in the Gallery, for example. It's or you could pick an album out of any part of the catalog. It's definitely part of that canon for sure. So yeah, the musicians. Obviously, we got Ian Anderson on vocals, flute, and acoustic guitar. John O'Hara is on the keys. Florian O'Pale, I still hope I'm getting his name right, on the guitar. I deliver some great performances on here. David Goodyear on bass guitar. Scott Hammond on drums, and we got Ryan O'Donnell again, who's his backup vocalist, who does a bit of backup vocals. That's the other thing worth mentioning with this album is I think this is his best vocal performance in a long time. I'm thinking, well, Rich to Branches maybe he does sing well on those late '90s albums, the world music era, but I think his voice sounds really good on this. I think his voice sounds a lot better on this than Tab 2. There's one moment on here where I think it's the best he's sang since Under Wraps maybe. Um, yeah, so it's a great album, and we're gonna start dissecting the tracks. It's interesting as we look at the back cover here. I hope there's no serious glare going on. I know I got glare problems in this room. But the album, as the concepts are divided into 3 sections. It is an album of songs. Like it's not, the album isn't really linked together. It's not like Thick as a Brick or Tab 2 or like that. The songs do have their endings, but it's put into these 3 parts. So we get most of the album is part 1, which is Chronicles. It's the first 8 tracks. Part 2, Prophecies, which is just 3 tracks, and then part 3, Revelations, which is 4 tracks, and they reference the early songs. There's a lot of really good like melodies that pop in and pop back, and there's a lot of themes that reprises that come in here. So that the concept as a whole, even though they are separate songs, the album is very much a cohesive piece of goodness. Okay, tracks. Album opens with Doggerland, and we get the main melody for the album. Really good kind of ascending melody, and it sets the tone for the album really well. We get Florian's guitar plays right along with that flute melody, so we get the idea. We get the idea. It's for the most part, it's a pretty heavy album. There's a lot of guitar. It's heavy rock flute. And the song is great. It does have that kind of proggy arrangement. There's some changes in tempo and tone and whatnot. I love the verses on here. That is so quintessential Anderson. When the guitar comes up and we get that dun 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 the Doggerland. That to me is so quintessential Anderson. It's kind of got that medieval minstrelry going on. And that goes for a lot of the stuff on this album. And it's quite a heavy track too, Doggerland. That chorus all across the Doggerland, do do do. Great heavy riffs. That's great opener. I quite like Doggerland. Like I said, it also gives us one of the main melodies that pops up throughout the rest of the album. Links it all together. So yeah, Doggerland is good. Track 2, Heavy Metals. This is almost like one of Anderson's little songettes, really. Again, like lyrically, we're talking about the dawn of migration and civilization. Obviously, I should mention Doggerland is the patch of land between that used to be between the UK and Europe when it was part of the continent. It was connected, and the first waves of people were going back and forth. But I'm getting all over the place as I do. Track 2, Heavy Metals. Like I said, it's like one of those classic songettes that would have appeared on like Aqualung or something like that, like A Cheap Day Return or something. But we get the early people are working with metal, and that's the lyrical theme to it. And I really like it. I like the background vocals that come in there. The hum. That's quite cool. And again, just classic Anderson guitar playing. It's fantastic. Track 3, Enter the Uninvited. This was, I'm not sure if it was released as a single or it might have been like a YouTube single. I remember when the album came out, the teaser was Enter the Uninvited. And as a single, I think it works really, really well. I think it is one of the best on the album. Obviously, I've got that positive connotation with it because I heard the song right around the same time I found out he was doing this album, and I really like it. Again, it has, it's not crazy prog. It's not like Dream Theater crazy, but there's a lot of different sections to it. And yeah, it's got a classic Anderson melody to it. I love the intro. We get that dun 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 dun. I can't remember the exact words. Face, place, stop. Sorry, we're coming in. I like that part. That's quite good. And obviously, right after that, we're coming in. We roam and I love that. I love that. The way that hook comes in is fantastic, and it's a great melody. And there's some really nice little embellishments. Like the second verse, we get John O'Hara on the keyboards doing those do 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 do. Only pops up in the second verse, but that's what makes it such a key moment. I quite like it. And this one, you know, obviously it's talking about like obviously migration. The whole album's kind of about that. But the last verses go into modern times, and they talk, you know, there's references to Marilyn Monroe and how migration works on a different level. You know, we invade other countries with, you know, our television programming and whatnot, and there's references to that. There's references to The Walking Dead. Which is funny because I'm not sure if any of you knew, but the fellow who plays Rick Grimes, whose name escapes me right now, I'm sorry, he is Ian Anderson's son-in-law, which is quite funny. So there's a funny little reference to The Walking Dead in there, which is cool. Yeah, and it is a really good song. Track 4, I'm gonna mispronounce some of these, I think. Track 4 is called Puer Ferox Adventus. Kind of a cool Latin-like title. Maybe it's not Latin. I don't know. And this is the song I was mentioning where I think it's the best vocal performance that Anderson has done in a very long time. It is fantastic. I love the intro. We get some kind of windy sounds, there's some thunder and whatnot, and you know, we get kind of that classic Celtic kind of melody, but it's just sung a cappella by Anderson. And you know, obviously it's not going to sound like Songs from the Wood, but it sounds really, really good. When I first heard this, I thought, oh, this voice is right there. I guess I just love those melodies. I just love that dun 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 dun. Dun. Can't do it because I'm not a good singer. But I really love that intro, and then the song itself is probably the closest we get to an epic of the album. There isn't really any like long songs, but track 4, the Adventus song, as I'm gonna call it now, is probably, you know, is the closest to that. Really dramatic melody, classic stuff, really. It's and a couple of mid sections where the tempo kind of speeds up, and we get some of that classic heavy rock. But on the whole, his voice is really good on this song. That's the thing I always noticed. And like I said, closest to the epic. Like, it doesn't. That's the one thing. This album doesn't have a moment like Change of Horses on tab 2. Like, I like this album as a whole better than tab 2, but it doesn't have something quite as good, something that stands out quite like Change of Horses does. I think that, like, I still really love that song from the other album. But we're talking about this. I already talked about tab 2. Silly me. We made it to track 5. Meliora Sequamur. I'm not sure what the title means, but it is. This is one of the highlights of the album for me. I really like this. We get. This is some of the stuff that reminds me of Minstrel in the Gallery. I'm not really sure why. It doesn't. Like, I can't think of what song on Minstrel that it takes me back. But it's just that medieval kind of melody, and it's very, you know, toned down. Like, we've had a lot of kind of heavy rock so far. But this one is, you know, it's not quite a ballad. It's just this creepy medieval melody. I just love that. Let us follow better things. Very nice. We also get a bit of Ryan O'Donnell, who appears on that, which is quite good. And then the middle section, we have a kind of a jazzy reprise of the main melody that's introduced in Doggerland. Quite good. Yeah, I really like Meliora Sequamur. That's again, it's one that stuck out to me right off the bat. Then we get to track 6, the Turnpike Inn. We go right back into heavy rock territory. Which is quite good. It's heavy rock with a lot of accordion. The accordion is back, and I think that's a great kind of staple sound of modern era Tull. And you can trace it back to War Child. I think I mentioned it in another video. There's some more accordion on War Child, which is quite nice. But Turnpike Inn is quite a unique mixture of the two, because you get Florin's heavy guitar riff, dun 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 dun, along with this pulsating accordion, which is really cool. The parts of the Turnpike Inn reminded me of parts of tab 2. Like one of the, I can't remember the title of the song right now, but one of the songs that talks about the ordinary Gerald, the heavier one of that. Part of Turnpike Inn kind of reminds me of that, but whatever. It's not a big deal. Yeah, there you go. Track 7, the Engineer. This one took me the longest to get into, I think, but I really like it. We're still kind of in the heavy territory of Turnpike Inn, slower tempo. But it took me a while to get it, but I really like the melody on Engineer. It's very European. Probably more UK influence. We're talking about at this point in the history part of the album. I think we're just approaching the Industrial Revolution. And yeah, I quite like the Engineer. There's a nice little flute solo in there. But yeah, I just think it does have a kind of a quintessential Euro kind of a melody to it, which I quite like. And that's nice over top of the heavier riffs and that. And then track 8, this finishes up part 1 of the album. This finishes up the Chronicles section of the album. The Pax Britannica. And as you can expect, this is very English. Very English. But it's got a nice it's got a nice little shuffle to it. Reminds me of some of the folk trilogy maybe. It has those kind of Celtic melodies. Pax Britannica, Pax Britannica, and that there's the Celtic thing and there's the medieval thing, and they're all kind of tall staples. And I think there's a really nice blend of all of that stuff on this album. And Pax Britannica is pretty good. It's not a standout track, but like I said, I remember listening to that and just that sounds pleasantly familiar. That kind of style. So yeah, that wraps up the Chronicles section, and then we get to part 2 of the album, which is called Prophecies. And this deals largely with the 20th century, talking about the world wars and that, and it opens with track 9, which is Tripudium Ad Bellum, which is the instrumental of the album. And this represents the world wars and global conflict and silly humans scrapping and doing terrible, terrible things and that. But what better? You can't really sing about that. What a better way? Of course you can, but it's well represented with a crazy instrumental. And yeah, it's really good. I think the main melody kind of represents the wars pretty well. There's some shifting time signatures and there's a lot of unexpected kind of changes and whatnot. And there's a franticness about it, but the middle section is actually really smooth. You get some really, really nice jazzy guitar chords, courtesy of Mr. O'Pale. And Anderson plays a fantastic, classy flute line on top of it, which is quite jazzy. Which may not be represent the wars that well, but the point is, it's a great piece of music. That's why I listen to albums, because I like the music on them, obviously. So I think that little flute solo is a highlight of the album, that jazzy flute solo, and then it goes back into the crazy section, the main kind of melody of the song. And the ending is quite crazy and mad, and there's just notes being flown all over the place. That's warlike. Which leads us to track 10, which is the serious point of the album. Again, another war song called After These Wars. Obviously, it's a war song. It's similar to Victor's Wooten Basset Town. On tab 2, and it is kind of the serious moment of the album. Obviously, the lack of fun dealing with war is abound on this, and it is quite serious. But it's it's okay. I like the intro. The intro is very stark, and then that comes back at the end, the very stark outro as well. And during this, there's and after these wars, there is a little reprise of a melody that's in the Turnpike Inn. I never noticed that before. Last time I listened to this the other day, and I did notice that there is a little bit of linkage between those two tracks, which again, it's great because all these themes hold everything together, like I said. So there you go. I don't know what it is. I respect the fact that these serious songs are very, very good, but I like some of the humorous stuff in Anderson's catalog. Anyway, track 11, New Blood, Old Veins. Just a short little song, just a 2-minute little piece, but I think it's one of the highlights of the album. It's got a really nice bouncy little rhythm, great vocal performance, great rhythmic. New blood, old veins, and again, there's some reprising of old themes that is very subtle. It's not like obvious that they're referencing that other part of the album. If you listen to it very carefully, you can tell that there's little variations of melodies and themes that have been put on display before. But I really, really like New Blood, Old Veins. It's quite nice. And that wraps up part 2, the Prophecies section, and we get to part 3, Revelations. So the last 4 songs kind of wind the album up. And it's a reprise of the first 3 songs, really, which is cool. Starts out with 12, In for a Pound, which is a reprise of Heavy Metals. It's only one verse. Heavy Metals is the 2 verses, so that's a minute and a half. In for a Pound is just 37 seconds long. But again, this is the one blatant reprise where our ears register. Oh, we've heard this somewhere before, and I like that. Track 13, we get to the Browning of the Green. This is talking about the present era. We're in early 21st century. We get some of that kind of the big heavy rock comes in, the big Florian guitar riff, and this is a reprise of some of the Doggerland themes. And kind of lyrically, we're bringing up we're talking about modern times, so that the environmental theme is back there. Which again, that's a big thing from the trilogy albums, the folk trilogy, Songs from the Wood, Heavy Horses, and Stormwatch. So again, there's so many quintessential Tull elements that are very nicely on display on this, I think. And it's nice that the environmental thing kind of comes up at the end of the album, and it's actually this whole last section I'm talking about is quite a stark warning, really, and it works really well. So Browning the Green, yeah, really good reprise of the Doggerland themes, nice and heavy, and environmental lyrics. Then we get to track 14, Errationes Ad Astra. I don't know how to pronounce that, sorry. This isn't really a song, it's just another one of Ian Anderson's spoken word bits, similar to we had one on the previous album. It's quite stark, and there's a bit of funny lines that he throws in there, but the very end, where we go, man's time may have come and gone, may have already come and gone. That's quite stark, and that's quite ooh. Then we get some creepy atmosphere that works its way into the final song of the album, which is again one of my favorites, "Cold Dead Reckoning." And this is reprising the Enter the Uninvited themes. But what I really like about it is that it's not necessarily a really heavy song. It doesn't have the big it's kind of got these almost cheesy synth sounds, but they sound like an alarm going off. And so it's weird, there's a lighter timbre on it to the other parts of the album. There's no big heavy guitar riffs, but it's just got this menacing march, and there's a great sense of forewarning and cold dead reckoning. This is Anderson saying there's serious problems in the world right now in terms of the environment, and we're at a stage now where it's do or die, and there's a great urgency to it. And I like how he's able to convey that sense of urgency without resorting to be heavy or like bludgeoning and big riffs, which a lot of this album is those big riffs, which I like. But yeah, Cold Dead Reckoning is really good. Those cheesy synthesizers almost remind me of the end of darn it. One of the ELP albums. Reminds me of the end of Tarkus. Maybe that's a reference, maybe it's not. I don't think so. I think he's just making this really stark song without heaviness. I've said that about 20 times now. The last thing that I want to mention with Cold Dead Reckoning, after it all winds up, and it does, the last verse does get a bit heavy, but it wraps up and it's kind of a stark, quick ending. You think the album's over, and then we get this flute melody that comes in just for a few seconds. And I don't know what it is about it, but I just get chills down the spine when I hear it. It's just one of those quintessential Anderson flute melodies. I'm not sure what. There is something really special about it, but I don't really know what it is. Those last 30 seconds, if you listen to the album, you know what I'm talking about. I just love that melody that comes in. And there's some little glockenspiel kind of percussion-y bits on there, and it's that's almost worth the price of the admission. It makes the end of the album so fantastic. But I like those little details. I don't know why. So yeah, there you go. I just finished talking about Homo Erraticus by Ian Anderson. Technically the 6th solo album he wrote, but really it's the 30-something Tull album. If you ask me, it's all part of the same catalog. And I hope he releases more. The liner notes on this kind of hint that he might have an idea for a new album, which would be fantastic. But after this, he released the album. He toured it. He played the whole album. I never saw this tour, unfortunately. He didn't come too close to where I live. But he played the whole album at the front half, the first set, and then the second set was like a best of Jethro Tull classics. Very cool. And during the Tull classics, they played Critique Oblique. They played a Passion Play bit. That's awesome. Would love to have seen that. But then instead of releasing a third album, like it kind of implied he was going to do a third album. The next touring project he did was Ian Anderson Performs Jethro Tull, which was a reworking of Tull classics. I think there was a few new songs written for the tour, but it talks about Jethro Tull, the agriculturalist, who is the rightful owner of the name Jethro Tull. And I think that's quite a witty way of dealing with that whole confusion about Anderson and Tull and all that silliness. It'd be nice if that got released as a live album. I know they released the Thick as a Brick 1 and 2 was an album and a DVD. I got the DVD. And that's fantastic. I'd really like to see a live album or a DVD release of the Jethro Tull performance. Ian Anderson does Jethro Tull. That'd be great. Or of course a new studio album would be great too, because he's on fire. I mean, this sounds great. I love this stuff. And I've been reduced to rambling. I feel I should ramble on a little bit more because this is the end of the series so far. So it's been a long journey. And thank you very much, everyone, anyone who's made their way through all of the videos, all of the Tull videos. I know I've done all the Genesis videos, I've done the Giant videos and Vandergraaf, but this is quite a long haul going through all of Ian Anderson's work. He released a lot of albums as himself and his Tull, and yeah. So if you tuned in for all of these videos, thank you very, very much. It was very gracious of you. I'm glad you enjoy it. And if you're just tuning in now, well, hit me a subscribe button, send me a like, throw me a comment. I always love responding to comments. And yeah, I'm gonna think of another band to do, which I will do soon. So stay tuned for that. And thanks again very much for watching, everybody. And yeah, I think that's all there is to say. We will see you with a new band sometime very soon. Cheers.